Welcome to the Embodiment podcast. This show is for you if you see the body as more than a brain taxi. It's for people interested in coming home to the body as a holistic aspect of who we are and how we live. Episodes contain practical tips, exercises you can take away, and interviews with specialists from around the world. I'm your host for today, Mark Walsh. So on the show today, Susie Heath. So Susie's working with leaders. She's training other trainers and coaches. She's written several books. Creator of the Feminine Principle. She wrote a book on the essence of womanhood, various other things. I'm sure we'll have plenty to talk about today. So Susie, welcome.
Thank you very much. It's lovely to see you in the flesh after having seen you on video so often. So this is very good. Thank you.
It's a pleasure. I keep bumping into this funny situation in the world now since the conference, particularly where I meet people and they sort of squeeze me sometimes, or, you know, they're sort of checking I'm real and not just a podcast voice or a YouTube voice. Let's start with you though. So what was your journey with the body? How did you get interested in the body as one aspect of what you do?
Okay, well, probably as a kid, I did what most little girls do and wanted to be a ballerina. Got as far as being on my points and wanted desperately to go to ballet school, but I was too short. Okay. So that didn't ever work. Then I got very involved in singing. So I did a lot of choral work, a lot of opera. I ended up doing jazz, but did a lot of big works and feeling really how much the vibration of music affected me, affected my body and the way I was standing. And then later, I'm a mother of 3 kids, and believe you me, your body gets very involved when you're pushing babies out. But later on, in my 30s and early 40s, actually, I went off and explored dance and different versions. So I did belly dancing, well, all sorts of dance, actually, a lot of African dance. I did ballroom, I did jazz, I did anything that I could move with. And then went to Tony Robbins. And it was him, really, and his very masculine energy, who opened my eyes to the fact that you can change your state, an emotional state, by movement. And I hadn't connected the dots before that. So that made a lot of sense. So I followed him around the world and did all the usual things of firewalking and jumping off telegraph poles and crazy things like that, and breaking arrows on my throat, all that sort of stuff. But very much got into my masculine energy and burnt out. Again, I had done that previously with my with business and corporate work. But it was recognizing that my body just didn't enjoy this very strong, powerful, masculine energy that a lot of women are working with. And I did various other dances. And then I met biodanza with Professor Rolando Toro, who is my main, I suppose, my main influence, and from which I've taken a lot of the work that I do. I've also worked with Margot Anon and also Gabrielle Roth and the usual suspects, if you like. I was never into, I tried being into yoga. It didn't work for me very well. So it was about self-expression more than anything else. I think that's what's really grabbed me, is this opportunity to build one's own confidence, to learn to enjoy the pleasure of movement, because it's so lacking, certainly in the corporate world. And those are a lot of the people that I work with, people who sit at desks all day, then sit in front of a box, then get into a box to drive home and sit in front of yet another box. And they're just not moving their bodies the way that I believe nature designed us. And I had a lot of illness when I was a child, and also when I was in my early 30s again, actually, I ended up being told I'm going to have to spend my life in a wheelchair. I had a massive response to injections for travel. I was supposed to be going to deepest, darkest Africa, and ended up being in bed for a good few months and warned that I would have to spend because I had chronic arthritis. My whole body was swelling and aching. And it was that sent me on a sort of spiritual and healing journey, really. And that's where I really, really connected with the body-mind-spirit connection. without it being too fluffy, but the real practicalities, the science, the getting out of my head and allowing the body's wisdom to shine through.
And who's the sort of, what's the bread and butter of your work now? Is it corporate leadership work? Is it women's work? I mean, give me a sense of what your weeks look like.
At the moment, it's women's work. I've been working with women for the last 4 years mainly. Before that, I was doing a lot of relationship and intimacy work using embodiment, because it is my favourite topic. It's the bit where I really come to life, and the yin and yang and the polarity, and creating this, well, literally a dance of life between the masculine and the feminine. So at the moment, I've been working for the last 4 years with One of Many, which I co-created. And it's an organisation for women internationally now. We started off just with the UK, but it's going very much international. So I'm taking everything that we talk about from stage back into the body, giving people permission to let go of all the thought forms, the judgments, the criticism, the programming, the behaviours, the habits that we've got into. And it's very tender and very gentle and very sweet work, and also incredibly powerful, incredibly transformational. Quite a lot of tears get shed. 2 or 3 times a year I have about 320 women pour into the workshop, and I only have them for about an hour and 3/4. So I have to dive fairly deep with them in order to create some change. But it's extraordinary what happens with these women who are along the personal development path.
Okay, so I mean, the Embodiment podcast, and I know this is something you're interested in. What does that mean to you, this word embodiment?
I think it does mean almost allowing the thinking part of our brain, the cortex, to have a holiday for a change, and not think things out all the time. I'll always introduce my sort of opening sentences. Who in this room considers themselves to be a dancer or a good dancer? Yeah. And quite possibly women put their hands up really eagerly, and I say, I'd like you to forget everything you've ever learned about dance. Yeah. Because dance tends to be very formalized with choreography and steps, and it's not coming from that deep desire of self-expression. And it's fascinating because I've taught a lot of dancers. I've worked with belly dancing troupes, I've worked with opera singers, with ballet dancers, and their performance after I've worked with them has been so moving for the audience, because they're coming from their authenticity instead of coming from I've got to stand here on the stage and I've got to do this pirouette and this pas de deux and this, and the passion comes through in a very profound way, and it's as if they're connecting heart to heart and soul to soul with the people that they are performing with and performing for. The change is really extraordinary. So for me, it's all about self-expression. It's about transformation. It's about moving through all the places where we get stuck and learning a new way of movement, because, our biology is very much reflected in the way we move. You can see, I'm no doubt that you, like me, are a people watcher, and you can see so much of the way people, the way their stance is when they're huddled up, or whether their heart is more open, where their arms are in relation to everything else, the way they walk, whether they are actually present in their body, because that's another thing that you can tell so easily if people actually are present in the moment, or if they've gone into their head and they're comparing and contrasting themselves to other people, or whether they're doing that, am I doing this right? And yes, there's, a lot of most of the work that I do is guided. So I show an exercise, and I do use music, which stimulates the feeling content, the emotional content, if you like. But it just goes beneath the radar of thought, hopefully. But it takes time. Like when you're working with your people, it's not, I have the responsibility of working with quite a lot of women just maybe once ever. But even with the ones I work with just once, the messages I get back are extraordinary from women who have been told that they're infertile, going, I went back home after we did that lover exercise and made love with my husband, and we're pregnant of having been told we're not going to be. And it's tapping into those resources. I do a lot of work with the archetypes, and I find those really fascinating.
Which archetypes do you work with?
The main 5, the mother, father, the sovereign, the king or the queen, the magician, stroke sorcerer, the warrior, and I can never remember the 5th one when I'm doing this, and the lover.
Okay, so there's different sets. I've heard sets of 4, sets of 8, sets of 16.
I've
Okay.
got other subsets as well that I work with, but those are the predominant ones I work with.
Yeah. And I guess it's just giving people those embodied reference points that they may have forgotten that aspect of themselves. And what I like about embodied work is very quick, it's very direct, it's straight into things. Yeah. And if you've only got an hour, I would say this large group of women you mentioned, this group, I think leadership work, isn't it? Then it's a kind of straight into the heart of things.
Absolutely. And for women particularly, I mean, I've done a lot of work with men, but focusing on women at the moment, I do want to go back to working with my men, because there's a profound need to work with men, and particularly the younger ones. But it's fascinating how many women actually hate their bodies.
Do you think more women hate their bodies than men?
I think they're more vocal about it, perhaps. So they're conditioning their mind to be even more so, to keep, it's almost, conversations go to the lower common denominator sometimes with women. Oh, I don't like my whatever part of the body. And the other person says, oh, yes, I know the same problem. So we compounds the issue. But when you're moving, that changes. I have women of all shapes and sizes learning suddenly to love their bodies again. And I must actually tell you, there was a young man he was Asian, who I worked with last year in a group. There were only 20 people there. And he was one of the most beautiful young men I've ever seen. Exquisite. And afterwards he came up to me with tears streaming down his face, and he said, I never knew I was beautiful. And that was so moving for me. I think probably he was so beautiful that people took against him for his beauty, if you like. So never gave him that feedback that he actually was beautiful, but beautiful at a soul level as well. It wasn't just his physicality. Yeah. And it's this learning to love yourself. I have a workshop called Learning to Love Yourself, truly, madly, deeply, divinely, to just go into that, to learn to move, to stop chastising yourself, because the work I do is very much about creating new cellular memory. It's not so much working with trauma. I do, some release work, but it's not so much working with trauma. It's more layering on to the cellular memory a new pattern of behavior, a new joy, if you like. It's about finding this flame of life and actually living with your potential, rather than the potential being aeons away, actually bringing it out moment by moment. And it's extraordinary, the shifts. It never fails to amaze me, and I'm sure this must be the same with you, Mark, how deep and profound the transformation is. And it's so heartwarming. And
let's just jump in here. Let's talk about this word transformation. So there's a whole field of transformational learning, and the sort of workshops where people jump up and down and feel good. And I'm never quite sure what people mean by it. Like, what? Like, it sounds good, but what does it really mean? Talk about.
Well, I've done a lot of jumping up and down and that stuff, and it probably lasts for about 3 weeks, and then it's gone.
Yep.
Let's not kid ourselves. It's not gone into cellular memory. It's not. it's not become part of the person. It was just great while it lasted. And then there's this awful dip. So, I do give my people exercises to go away with and practice, particularly if they're working with the archetypes. So it's a constant, almost a daily thing to start moving in a new way, moving consciously, but then sort of doing a very gentle training of noticing, very much being present and noticing how your attitude to life changes and how you see things differently. I know that when I'm doing the work I do, it creates a different way of speaking. The words I use are enriched. The way I look at the world is enriched. And this is what's happening with my ladies. But you do have to keep feeding it. It's not a it starts to become a way of life. And asking the body, what does it need right now? Because the body will tell you. It will. We've lost touch with so many of our instincts. If you look back, aeons ago, we were able to ascertain the people we should have kept away from. We were able to know instinctively not to walk down a particular place. We would know instinctively what was good for us to eat. But we've now covered our body with so many artificial scents, perfumes. If you saw the things that some women are sold, there's a spray for every part of your body. So we lose our natural scent. So that instinct of connectivity with the other sex is gone, because it's a fake aura that we're giving out, a fake perfume. So it's very much about reconnecting with those almost primordial instincts and getting back what our body knows. It's in our DNA as far as I'm concerned. And it's just reawakening that. So I think that's where the transformation comes. It's a transformation of the way we think and the way we move to reinforce a new pattern of thinking. I know that if you're feeling low and you move, your body starts to create new hormones and it becomes a new energy. So you change. That in itself, it might only be a tiny bit of change, but that in itself, when you keep repeating it and noticing it, creates a transformation.
Yeah,
but it is about
the state becomes trait through practice, right? So we have state shifts, and then we have practices which embed those, as you say, and that changes cognition, perception, relationships, intuition, all the areas that we know are impacted by embodiment, which are fairly far and wide.
Yeah, and if you look at I have a lot of friends who are chiropractors, and they talk a lot about proprioception. So it's where your body is in relation, where your limbs are in relation to the rest of the body, and starting to notice and starting to admire the beauty of and the magnificence of the way the body works. I mean, it's phenomenal. It's just extraordinary. But most people don't take any notice of their body until things start to go wrong. And then they berate it for not behaving the way they want it to. Mm-hmm. Whereas learn to move with more fluidity, more power, more dynamism, life just transforms. It literally the way we view. I was talking to my son last night about. I was working with a martial artist, and I can't even remember the name of the martial art, but I was doing this privately with him some years ago. And he had one of these long sticks, it was like a kendo stick, and he was going round and round and round, and I had to jump over this damn thing. And if I missed, it whacked me very hard. And at the end of 6 weeks of working with this guy, only once a week, my eyes changed colour. Now, my eyes are hazel, but they changed to green. And I contacted him and said, this is bizarre. I didn't know that this would be possible. And he said, yes, it does happen, because you've changed your hormones, you've changed just the way your body is functioning and the way you're moving and the way you're connecting. And that for me was a real eye-opener. Again, understanding how the physiology, how much our physiology affects our chemistry, affects our everything. We become different beings. And I know that, when I'm working with other people, that profound connection of, it's affection, it's love, it's a deep connection heart to heart with other people, looking each other in the eye and seeing people for who they are, and looking for what I call the flame, and speaking to that flame in people, that potential, that life force. We rejuvenate. And this is what I find, that working with a lot of my people, everybody looks so much younger. So there's something happening chemically and hormonally inside our bodies, not just the fluidity of movement, but the connection, this heart-to-heart thing, is profound.
Why the women's work in particular? What was the draw there?
I think it was, I suppose, initially for me because of burnout. And once I burnt out so badly, and I literally couldn't get out of bed, everything ached, and the doctors couldn't find anything wrong, except there was too much cortisol and adrenaline in my system. And realizing how much women are judging themselves. I think a lot of it is that and overworking and trying to become more and more like men. Mm-hmm. And we've done really well at becoming more and more like men, but at what cost? Mm-hmm. And the cost has been huge, Mark, absolutely huge for women. I see them aging way before their time. Their hair goes grey way before their time.
Yeah, look around the tube on any Monday, on the London, and look around, and I see
the men.
I see 30-year-old women looking like 40-year-old women for sure.
It's almost like 40-year-old men.
Yeah, there's an energy shift, isn't there, in being involved in that life. So is your kind of sense then? There, what? Sorry.
Fertility is really, it's really something.
Yeah. Male fertility is also way down.
The methodology of exercise tends to be, let's go to the gym, let's cycle like fury for 40 minutes and make sure we keep up with the men. Let's go and lift weights, let's pump, let's do marathons, let's do Iron John or the, whatever the thing is, the Iron Man. It's all, we've got to not only be as good as men, but beat them.
Yeah.
And it's causing havoc. Absolute havoc.
So your sense is like, there's this kind of masculine way of doing things in the world, of exercising, of working, that's, pushing stronger, faster, harder, more, pushing those edges, driving. And then women have entered into that and they've said, okay, great. We can not only play this game, you can beat the men at it. And there's a real cost to that.
A massive cost. And then the problem is they then take that masculinity back to their relationships.
Sure.
I'm wondering why, A, they don't have sex, B, they don't have an orgasm, C, they can't get pregnant, and D, why the husband is going, oh, this is the woman I fell in love with.
Yeah.
Who the hell are you? If the man is very masculine himself, then it becomes, I talk about this in my books, it becomes like two stags fighting in a wood for supremacy. And at any one stage, if you look at the yin yang symbol, which I love, actually, I love this idea of a dynamic. It's not a balance, because balance doesn't work, but it's a harmony. It's a dynamic between this yang energy, which women have to have. If you're going to push a baby out, you can't do that in yin. You have to push a baby out with yang energy. But the growing and the gestation of the baby needs to be in yin energy. And, if you've got a relationship at any one time, if you want to create a sexual polarity, a juiciness, a deliciousness, an appreciation, one needs to be more yang than the other needs to be more yin than the other. So it becomes a dance of relationship as well. And it's not really until the women start to understand that and not be afraid of the fact that the word feminine isn't being pink and fluffy and Barbie doll or pathetic. You know, there's an incredible power in yin energy. And there's nothing wrong with bringing a softer power to the boardroom. I work a lot with very high-flying doctors, with high-flying CEOs, with heads of various companies, and I go to a lot of conferences where these women, honestly, they would eat people for breakfast, but you talk to them and they're on the verge. You start talking to them woman to woman, if you like, and they're in floods of tears before long, going, I wish I knew how to tap into that feminine energy and still be strong and not be bullied or pathetic. Because women have an enormous amount of creativity and collaboration and just different abilities from men. So my call out is always, you know, let's work in collaboration. Neither masculine nor feminine is better than the other, but why not work in collaboration? There are things that men do, women can't do, things women do that men can't do, but when we work together, my goodness, you know, that is really important. There's this beautiful quote, two halves, yes, they do make a whole, but two wholes, when they get together, that is beauty, that is love. And it's this whole, making ourselves whole as we are and bringing that to the other person. And I think that's very profound as well.
And do you get, I mean, there's lots I could relate to there for sure. And I've definitely seen women who can compete, but are getting kind of burnt out by it. And, you know, ultimately it's not their deepest desire, as it were. And, you know, men too, but I definitely see, you know, when I'm working in corporates, for example, a lot of what you're talking about, for sure, there's real truth in it. And people who maybe are like, you know, have competed for years, they're doing well, but really they're just on the verge of breaking down and going, I really don't want to do this on at least some level. It feels like no one's being served by that. And do you get any pushback against this story, though? You know, people saying, hey, are you saying women should just be fluffy or be not in the boardroom? And, you know, are you saying men are all one way and women are all another? I mean, I imagine in the sort of modern context, you're getting quite a lot of pushback against this perspective.
Yeah, I think, you know, when I first brought my book out, The Essence of Womanhood, I brought that out in 2007 initially. And I was terrified to have that published. I thought I was going to get squashed tomatoes and eggs thrown at me because it was very scary putting my head above the parapet and going, you know, we're missing a trick, women, here. Yeah. And I'm not suggesting we go back to the way our mothers and grandmothers were, which was barefoot and pregnant in the kitchen, you know, or to be walking 10 paces behind the man. And it's not that. Yeah, and I think, yes, there is this, you know, certainly I've had to stand my own, though, let's look at this in a different way. And let's not think of the feminine or the yin, whichever you want to call it, as being pathetic and weak, because, my God, it's not. It's so not. And when, but yes, that initial reaction is terrifying. You know, yes, there are a lot of women going, who do you think you are? We've spent decades trying to get to where we are, and you're trying to take us back. And I'm not. I'm actually supporting it to take us forward. But also I want to teach men about women, because, bless your hearts, you've not been taught very well.
Okay. I'm getting my notepad out now. Yeah, what's the masterclass? What do I need to know, Susie?
I can't give it to you all in 5 minutes, Mark.
Give me a few top pointers.
Where do I go with this? Where do I go? I shouldn't have opened this bit of the conversation, should I? I think it's understanding the female brain is different from the male brain. We explain things in a very different way. We are more circuitous in the way we discuss things. If we ask you to do something, we know exactly and precisely what we want. So, for instance, if we ask you to go shopping and we want something specific, we would have to be able to tell you exactly where it is. We would say it's in the third aisle and the third row down, and it's got a red packet with gold writing. Please don't get the one with blue writing. And that goes back to it's as simple as this. It goes back to cavewoman days, where we had to know which berries on the trees were poisonous, and where we could squat in the grass to pee where we wouldn't get our bottom stung by stinging nettles. We'd have to know literally what was safe, where to go, where there wasn't a snake in the grass. So we know precisely what we need. So if you come back with the wrong product, we will go, you've ruined our recipe. And you go, for goodness sake, it was only a jar of pesto. Yes, but it's the wrong variety. I wanted the one that had this particular type. So women are very specific, but we're not very good at expressing our specificity, if you like. Women have different emotions and different emotional states that we do take a long time to get to the point. You are more direct. We are not direct. We can talk over 5 discussions. There can be a group of 10 women at a table having wine and having supper together, and we can dot in and out of different conversations easily. And it drives you a lot mad because you're wanting us to get to the point quickly.
Yeah, I do notice some general differences in how people answer questions, for example, on the podcast. I mean, it's not 100% of people, but I do notice a general pattern.
Yeah, we're all around the houses. This is the feminine energy. It wants to bring more beauty. It wants to create more. It wants to express itself more in the world. And you guys are just, for goodness sake, get to the point, woman. But we have different, our bodies are so different. The response is different, very different sexually, very different with our sexual response, our sexual needs. We're not very good at asking for what we want. A lot of women don't even know their bodies sufficiently to ask for what they want. So I would just love, and I have been asked to do this actually, I just need to get on with it, is get a whole lot of men in the room and explain how women work so that you can understand us in a way that, again, you work with us instead of thinking that we're opposite sides of the fence and battling with us. In business, in relationships, in just the way we see the world. A lot of fear, I think, for women now is that technology is soaring in a way that we can't get hold of. And women, because we're the birth givers, and not every woman chooses to be, and not every woman is able to be. I don't take that lightly. But there's this profound understanding that what we're doing is affecting future generations so much. Women have something like 82% of buying power, between 82 and 85% buying power. And we're not aware of that enough to make that a massive difference. And I don't mean by buying frivolous things, but by women themselves need to be taught to buy differently, to buy more consciously.
People don't normally mention that one when they talk about the gender pay gap.
No, we won't talk about the gender pay gap. Not today. No,
so men are making more money, but women are spending more of it. So who has the financial power? It's an interesting question, huh? Marketers know that. That's why most adverts are insulting to men, because most of the audience are women. But
But women now are the force that have the opportunity to change the world. It's not China. It's not technology. It's women.
Why?
Because we have more spending. We are doing most of the spending.
So you're saying the consumer kind of driven world, then women are actually controlling most of that spending power. They need to learn.
This is very controversial.
But, I mean, in marketing circles, it's not controversial. And anyone going to business school and studying marketing will just be told this is a fact. This isn't, there's lots of studies showing this.
So it means that I don't really want to get too deep because we're supposed to be talking about embodiment, but it's, to me, the way when we move, when we start to notice things differently, when we start to work in nature. I do a lot of work, in olive groves, in large gardens. I work outside when I can, and always barefoot, because our senses pick up so much through our feet. But when we have that deeper and more profound connection with nature, that's when women will start to go, we need to shift this stuff with plastic. We need to shift the way we're looking after animals. We need to nurture our children in a better way to be more responsible citizens. So what my work is so much more than just movement and dance. There is this shift of awareness. There's this shift of, who am I? And recognizing that we do have the power to change things. The way we move can change the way our confidence is. It changes our self-esteem. We get to know who we really are in our authenticity. Instead of putting masks up, I do a lot of work with taking away masks, and working with just changing the way we look at different programs. I have a spiritual mentor that I work with, and his work is really profound for me. And so a lot of the work that I do, I feel is tapping into not a spiritual realm that's fluffy, but it's powerful connection with our own life force and this force of life out there. And we feel it in our bodies and start to feel that we have that opportunity to make a difference. And I find it extraordinary how much difference it makes when we're working with the body and the expressivity of the body as opposed to the thinking aspect. I've been to years and years of conferences where you sit on your bottom for 5 days and it's just talk and more information. For me, when we start to move and embody some of the practices in our movement, it's the flexibility, it's the fluidity, it's the power, the strength, the power in our arms, the power in our buttocks that allows us to move forward, to be able to step into a new future, to be able to walk with more confidence and more authority. That's when we can make a difference. So it's, I really honour the work that you're doing. It's profound, and I want it to get out to as many people as possible, because it changes. We're tapping into that wisdom, and I believe that thing that we've always known since childhood, but we've had it covered up with programming and conditioning over the years. It's allowing that to fly free again.
What do you think's changed in the last couple of years? You've talked about women's work, leadership, embodiment generally. My sense is in the last couple of years, or even the last 6 months, something's shifted. What's your kind of listening on the kind of lead edge of this right now?
I'd love to hear from which aspect you're talking about. What aspect?
Well, relating, for example, you've talked about women's work. Well, since you wrote that book, gender relations have profoundly changed, right? Like even the last 2 years, the last 6 months, like I had a conversation with a female yoga teacher today, and we were talking about how relationships between yoga teachers and students have changed, and gender around that. And even the conversation we had today, I don't think would have been possible 6 months ago. And 2 years ago, it would have been confusing or not on the radar. So since you wrote that book, for example, in that, in leadership things have changed, in business things have changed, but in any of the areas you're interested in, I'd be open to hear from.
We have a lot of doctors that I work with now, so I think this whole thing is going very much into a deeper understanding with allowing more self-care. I think self-care is coming up more. Mm-hmm. Is that, and that's a teaching and an allowance. Women have got to allow themselves to have self-care. And that doesn't mean going, to say, what self-care? I go and have my nails done and I have my hair cut. No, that's not what I mean. I really do mean listening to your body and resting when you need to rest. If you need to have a 10-minute nap, for goodness sake, do so. Drink when you're thirsty.
Yeah.
Be when
A deeper view of self-care is emerging, which isn't simply the bubble baths, right? Which is really about a deep listening and a boundary setting and looking at all relationships. And if anything, I see people sometimes using that now as an excuse for a kind of I'll do whatever I feel like, and actually disposing of other people. I've seen this sort of healthy self-care, which I've been pushing for years, go to a deeper self-care, which I'm really happy about. And then now into something else, which looks like a kind of like, I don't feel like you anymore. It's self-care. Get out of my life. Like I've combined with this modern disposability culture. I've seen a kind of fairly toxic version of that recently.
Yes, it's really interesting you should talk about that, because I'm starting to see sort of narcissistic behaviour coming a little bit more to the fore.
And do you think under the banner of self-care or more generally?
Yes, sometimes, yes.
Yeah.
So, and, I get very troubled about some of the relationships and the conversations people are having that are not done with loving care. Mm-hmm. Towards other people. This is my truth, so I'm going to tell you. And I find that really worrying. I find I don't want to go into millennial behaviour because I don't know sufficient about it. I know that I get very anxious about a lot of it.
Well, I think that's okay as an elder in the field to give a viewpoint. I mean, you don't have to come across as a sort of crotchety old woman. I think you could, give a viewpoint of eldership with some authority as someone who's been working with women for many years. I think that's completely valid if you want to.
I think what I'm seeing with the younger people that really troubles me is the way sex is being a commodity. Some of the things I'm seeing with the parents and their 14-year-old daughters, it's terrifying. It's
what
terrifying.
Do you mean?
There's
like sort of dating
there's no connection. There's a lot of selfies of body parts being literally flashed around. There's a lack of self-disrespect, of not honouring oneself.
Okay. I'm seeing increasingly young women realize that they can attract a certain amount of attention, validation, and potentially monetization of their sexuality and their image and their body. And that's very, very normal for quite pornographic images. I'm not talking about sort of people sending selfies to their boyfriend, which in some ways doesn't particularly bother me as long as I'm not misusing them. But this culture of almost like prostituting oneself for validation and attention particularly. And I'm told there's even almost like a market where it's like, I have friends who have hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands of Instagram followers, and they get offers, take me here, fly me here, buy this for me. And there's a way in which women can scale men's desire. Like like if you grew up in a village, there might be sort of 3 men competing for you, and you might get them all to buy you gifts. And there was, that's always been part of male-female dynamics, but now you can scale that and put that out virtually in a way which I don't think women have had access to before. That kind of power that a young woman has always had has now been multiplied without necessarily having the wisdom to go with that massive power.
Yeah, I think you put your finger on that. They don't have the wisdom, they don't have the experience, they don't have the guidance. And I don't want to be a crusty old woman telling them something different, but I find it very distressing when I hear that 9-year-olds are watching pornography, or they're being shown pornography, not necessarily seeking it out, but these are children, and they're being exposed to things that they're not capable of understanding at this stage. I worry for them.
Yeah.
I'm a mother, I'm a grandmother,
yeah.
I've got young grandsons, and I worry for their generation. I worry that they don't appreciate things because they're too busy doing stuff that's not reality. They don't go out into nature. They're just on technology so much of the time. Not all the time, so much of the time.
Yeah.
I think there's a quality of life that's being missed, and it saddens. I want to show people the beauty of the world. I really want to, because it is so beautiful. I live in Spain most of the time, so I'm sitting here. I'm halfway up a mountain with orange and lemon trees in my garden, just there, and I can see the sea, and it's exquisite. The air is so clear and so clean, and I just want so much for the world not to be ruined. For people to get in touch with what they're seeing, what they're hearing, what they're tasting, what they're smelling, what they're touching, get back that instinct. And you can see I'm moving my fingers. It's this palpability, this sense.
That's nice. Palpability. So in a kind of virtual world, there's something about the palpability of embodiment, of embodied relationships without, obviously we're connecting online today. We're Zooming each other, and this is going out on a podcast. So without being down on that technology, there's something 10 of my mentees are getting together in Brighton tomorrow morning, and they've come from all over Europe. And even though we talk online, there's something about the palpability of getting together, meditating together, not even speaking, eating together, dancing together. We're starting with a yoga class. It's like there's something about that palpability which is irreplaceable. I wonder if as we go into an increasingly virtual world, embodiment rises. Like, I was shocked at the success of the Embodiment conference. But I wonder, as we get increasingly virtual, there's something about palpability which will become appealing and necessary.
If you look at the importance of touch and how healing it is, I'm teaching women to caress their own skin rather than just chucking body lotion on. Really, really feel their skin, admire it and love it, and say nice things to themselves rather than, oh God, my thighs are fat and I hate my nose. It's the words we use affect ourselves. I know you know all this, but the words we use, we're conditioning ourselves by the language we're using, whether it's thoughts spoken out loud or inside our heads. So teaching women to actually appreciate their skin and their hands and their arms and their elbows and their breasts and their knees and their bottoms, they've never done that before. And I'm very conscious that I work, I have a lot of gay women in our groups, more and more, not a lot, but more and more gay women are coming to understand themselves more, which is wonderful. And a lot of women, bless them, have had sexual abuse. I reckon probably 43% of most audiences that we have had some form of sexual abuse.
40%, did you say?
Yes, yeah.
So how do you work that out? You talk to them, they come to you with stories?
Yes, they come to us because we have big retreats and everything. I do a lot of coaching. I do a lot of my work is coaching couples and coaching women individually, but coaching couples. And there's so much there of recovery from rape. And to me, embodiment is a beautiful way of very slowly teaching the body not to be afraid of touch again. And to start seeing the wonder and the beauty of the world. And I know I've seen a lot of men with, over the years who've been abused by relatives and by people.
There's a lot of men, but there's more women. That seems to be the consensus, right?
Not just there's a lot of men who have been bullied and brought up by fathers who haven't given them that fatherly care and response.
What I see is definitely a endemic low level abuse of men in terms of just telling them not to feel, not allowing them to have touch and be tenderness in ways where girls may meet, will actually be much more affectionate that way, and that gets bullied out of boys quite quickly. And then what I see more in women is a greater degree of the really serious sort of sexual assaults and rapes and things. When I first had girlfriends tell me about these experiences, I was like, oh my God, and then it would be another one and another one. I thought maybe I'm attracted to these women. So I talked to other men, and the older men were like, no, if you really talk to women, you'll hear these stories. And there's something about hearing each other's pain
and being able to be present to that in a way which, without getting overwhelmed, without getting flooded, having the resource in the body to actually to be able to hear some of these difficult stories, I think is profoundly necessary in healing.
Yeah. And mental health as well. I find that this is just moving, because if you're just sitting with the problem, talking, you're reconditioning the brain, whereas again, movement and self-expression, whether it's expressing anger or seeing beauty and learning a new way of envisioning and stepping into that. This is such a treasure we have, Mark, to be able to, and such an honor and a privilege to be able to do this work with people. I have a brother who has quite challenging mental health issues. He's bipolar, and I have other people around me who've suffered with profound depression, and it's really hard. But get them to move. And as you know, as you mentioned earlier, physiology affects our emotional state. So you can change state just by moving. So that opportunity to give permission to move rather than just lie on a couch for 20 years makes such a difference.
Susie, I think this kind of honor of doing this work is a nice place to wrap up. So very briefly, two things. Where can people find you online? What's the best link to go to?
The best link, I just have a squeeze page at the moment while I decide how I'm going to build my next website, is just susieheath.com. There's a little squeeze page there.
Got it.
And if you if you're kind enough to share your email, I don't spam people. I need to do the due diligence on that as well. But there's a download of Little Gems, which is a potted version of the essence of womanhood.
Great.
So you can find me on Facebook as Susie Heath.
Great. Well, you've reminded me to remind the audience as well that if people actually go to the podcast website, they can see the links to these things. There's also a load of resources on that webpage, and if people want to kind of be emailed about different podcasts and different things that are coming out, then to put their email to that as well. So thank you for the reminder of that. And a final parting message, Susie. What would be a way of saying a parting message about the body, perhaps?
Just to explore the magnificence of it. Never take it for granted. Enjoy the movement. Enjoy the joy of movement, the pleasure of movement.
Susie, thank you so much for joining us today.
Bless your heart. It's been a great pleasure. Thank you very much, Mark.
Some ways to get more, to give back, and to get more involved now. So the biggest request I have would be to share the podcast with your friends, people that you think would really enjoy it. Email it to them, put it on your social media, tell them about it, old school. Really appreciate that. Equally, if you want to support us financially, you can go to Patreon. That's patreon.com/embodiment podcast and give us $1 an episode. And I'd say they're well worth $1. So that's less than £1 if you're in UK-ish. So please go there. On the embodifacilitator.com website is where this is hosted. Most people I think listen to for iTunes. iTunes, we'd certainly appreciate a review. The way iTunes works means that a review means more people will find it. iTunes regards it as more important for searches. So even a couple of sentences review really does help as a little thank you to us. And if you want to go to embodifacilitator.com, you can see the actual, links to the sites. There's comments on there. The Facebook group tends to be where people discuss things. So if you go to put in the Embodiment podcast into Facebook, there's a page which is relatively quiet and a group which does have some discussion on. So I will reply to things personally there. So also on embodifacilitator.com website, there's all sorts of freebies there. There's videos, there's free ebooks, there's ebooks you can buy. And of course, there's our newsletter list. If you want to stay in touch and learn about things like the Embodied Facilitator course and our next Embodied Yoga Principles teacher training, then go to that website and you'll see a little pop-up and you can get the newsletter through there. Okay, so I think they're the main ones. Tell your friends, pay us some money on Patreon, give us a review on iTunes, Send us your email if you want to be on the newsletter list, and get involved on the Facebook. There, bit long. Pick whatever you like that works for you.
Till next time, welcome home to the body.